Welcome to episode 107 of A Master's Degree in Rolling Terribly. I'm your host, Eddie, and joining me this week, a man who discovered that if you leave your jump at home, you're gonna have a bad time. Gaz! Say hi, Gaz.
Hi, Gaz.
Care to elaborate?
I didn't bring my one jump card, and then I got stuck in a room for 10 rounds.
Yeah, we were talking about this last week with losing it at the draft, and then it happened again. And what's funny also is that Mark, during the playthrough, was like, well, bees would also be handy, and you're like, yeah, that's the same card, right?
Correct. Yes, he was very correct that if I had to stand in one place for 10 rounds, being able to put something next to me that heals me every round would have been really helpful. But if I'd had that, I could have jumped out of the room and I wouldn't have had to be stabbed. So it actually would have solved both of my problems, just the one card, yeah. I'm finding more and more ways to be shit at the game.
Play on hard mode.
Oh, it's not even hard mode. It's like, I don't know, removing your mouse so you can't play. It's not playing on hard mode. It's just like staring at a screen going like, this game looks cool, but I can't play it.
Yeah. What was the thought process behind I don't need it? Like, you know, because you gave me crap for my media back then when I wasn't picking the jump cards because I was always complaining about lacking of jump. And there's jump boots, and you obviously used to have an agility orb on your previous character, so there's that as an option. There's a few different options there.
Yeah, that's actually thinking about it now. There's many options that I didn't have, but I've had in the past. I usually prioritize at least one jump card for exactly this reason on almost every character. That's why I take jump boots as usually the primary boots I take, because some characters don't have a good like move 4 jump type card that you can reliably just hold in your hand in case you need it. I mean, without going too far into the snow, it's 3 rooms, and I looked at the size of it and went like, I should be able to like kind of slowly move along without needing my big moves. It wasn't so much I didn't take the move 4 jump because I said I won't need a jump. I opted to not take the bees, being the colony, because I said I'm going to try to go a different direction with this and play a bit differently. I'm going to take different colony cards. Now, unfortunately, the bees is the only one that has jump on it. So I didn't really think that. I didn't go, I'm not taking any jump. I went, I'm not taking bees. Forgot that because I had other movements enough.
And
yeah.
just quickly on that, we've actually got another player, Mark, who's playing a more of a supportive role. So he's got more of those targeted heals, which probably also gives you the feeling of I don't need them as much, right?
That's what I thought. Yeah, like they're dropping it for heal 1. I wasn't sure how much I was going to get to use it, and blah blah blah. I took other colonies because I wanted to make more offensive use of the colonies rather than the healing. And so therefore I didn't take it. And then I realized that because I hadn't taken it, I didn't have a jump. And then I realized that when I'm in front of so many, right? And we'll get into it. We'll get into it when we get to what happened, but essentially I had the decision at a point where I was like, well, I can stand here and probably lose a bunch of cards over the next 2 or 3 rounds, but do something, or I can leave and get stuck at the back for 10 rounds. And I'm not exaggerating. It was close to 10 rounds.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
people think.
Yeah, when I was editing it, I think I was like, I'm up to like around 12 or 13, and you're still in the room.
Yeah, it was 2 full rest cycles.
Nice.
Which included long rests.
That should be a challenge, or it should be a battle goal or something like that.
Do nothing for the whole game.
Well, I mean, that would make the scenario harder.
It's harder for me personally as the player to sit there through it. Yeah. So look, not the game's fault, completely my fault. I made bad decisions, and I'll own that. And yeah, I think I ended up saying that was one of the worst Haven experiences that I've had in my entire life. And that's not the fault of anyone but my own. All right? Anyone but my own. But that was, and worst as in it wasn't bad, it was just boring.
Yeah.
Like
you weren't even moving bodies. You weren't moving bodies, you weren't moving a gold tile or anything like that. You literally had rounds where you were just like, I don't know what to do.
None of these cards do anything, right? None of them do anything at all, right? And that was challenging. Or, hey, and occasionally when they could do something, the enemies chose cards or chose their abilities well to counter that, which was, again, that's not RNG's fault. It's my fault for being in that position in the first place. But yeah. So anyway, like definitely interesting. So next week can't get any worse because even if I died in the first 5 rounds, it would be more interesting.
I think it would be. It'd be 5 very interesting rounds.
It would be.
We'll actually get to our recap like very soon, actually. Before we go too deep down that.
Sorry.
That's all right. No, it's completely fine. So on today's episode, we recap scenario 13, which is pretty much what we were talking about. It's going to be a fun discussion. It was called Corpse Cavern. We're going to go through our amDirt Diaries and our topic for the week, which makes sense. The Dee Pee Ess, the damage dealing role discussion. But before we jump into that, there was a couple of tiny things that I wanted to mention, or mostly one other thing towards the end of last week. And it was one of the questions I was going to have prepared was, is there a tank mechanic or something that we're missing from the game, right? As in, there's all these mechanics around absorbing damage, and obviously you've got things like ward and shield's the most obvious, and then retaliation, which is damage, but usually coinciding with someone who can be hit many times, therefore being a bit more on the tanky side. Is there something that hasn't been explored? And I've actually mentioned my idea to you probably a while back in having a separate amD for tanking and a separate amD for healing, in that when you get hit, you flip the card over and like it's a small deck, but it'll either have one shield or two shield or one shield and retaliate, or it'll actually make you take more damage, right? Like it enhances the damage, like your shield works worse, but just as a separate side amD. I mean, this game could eventually become amD the game, where it's like, I move, let's see what happens with my move in amD, you know? Just dice rolls for everything.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of ideas that come to mind just really quickly on the fly, right? One of them is dodging, and I think there is a dodge icon status mechanic in Crimson Scales or TOA. I'm not sure which of those it comes from, but we haven't seen it yet. Yeah. So I assume like Rupture, it's a kind of probably really specific to A class, although I know when I unlocked Beetle, one of the cards I got did have Rupture on it as well, which was random. So maybe it kind of spreads out, but that dodge tanking is like one of the agi tanking type thing. Is usually reserved for tank characters in games that like monks or not really rogues, although evasion
like
tends to be their
dex-based characters.
Yeah, exactly. Like I know in like Ragnarok Online, it was like the agi swordsman or whatever, which was like, you have heaps of HP, but you mostly, instead of defense or whatever, you have really high agi, so you just don't get hit. Stuff like that. So I think that's one aspect. But that could be in the game, so we don't know.
True.
The other thing, to build on what you were just saying, which I think would be really cool, is a tanky character built in a similar way to, say, like fire demons. Like flame demons and wind demons, I think it is, have really high shields.
Yeah.
Whichever ones of those are, they have high shields but low health, right?
Wind demons have fairly normal health, but yes, fire demons definitely have low health.
Which demons. Ones are the other spirits?
Living spirits have low health.
That's it, yeah. So similar to that, right? So you have a character that, say, has similar to Galaxy Health, right? So they're like 6 at level 1, right? So you're talking the low health and then the low progression. But they have innate shield, right? So they have innate shield too. I'm just making these numbers up now, so totally completely unbalanced, right?
Yeah.
But your amD, whenever you get hit, you flip a card over, and that increases or decreases your shield.
Yeah, okay. As in the number.
So every time, the number. So a 0 just means you stay on 2. A -1 means you actually go down to 1. So that's you take more damage. Gotcha. And then the +1 increases it. And then you'd have cards in your amD which enhance it and make it better. And you work on that. And then your cards could do things like, reduce the amount of shields you've got for a turn to increase your attack or give you ward. I don't know. You could play around with that idea. But you kind of play this really fragile tank that has like really high defense, but like if pure damage is going to wreck you, just like it does with the flame demons.
Gives you a whole other thing to sort of worry about. Like not enough, because pure damage is not normally, unless it's a trap, right? Pure damage is not really enough to burst you down. Like even Shrike Fiends, like at I don't know medium level, are doing 2 or 3 pure damage. That's each, by the way. So that's bad. But at least you can kind of expect it, knowing what enemy type you're up against. So yeah, interesting. And you've also taken the AMD, the same AMD, but it's being used for 2 different purposes, which adds a whole other dimension to it, which is very cool.
Yeah, I mean, it might get a bit admin-y because you'll be flipping it over heaps, but I mean, like, if it's not every character, I feel like that's okay. And then potentially that character has less attacks. So maybe you have these things where I don't know, you're reducing your shield. You use it like your shield can potentially become a resource. So like a thing that you weaken or strengthen depending on what you're going to do. But it also makes things like wound really deadly, right? Like if you're running around on low HP, you got to get that off. So maybe one of the things you do to balance is that it has no self heals, right? So it doesn't have the ability to kind of keep its HP up. It really needs to make sure that its HP doesn't go down. So, something like that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
What faction
And
would you make it?
what?
What faction?
Like race?
Yeah.
What's the most? Probably like is it Orchid? Are they like what's the fragile ones? Like the spell wave like that.
Yeah. I think that's Aether.
Yeah, Aster, that's it. Yeah, or maybe
I
even
was gonna say
maybe he.
unfettered, right? That will kind of suit the high armor, low health, because it's like a bot with like just layers and layers of Doonas on it, like bed
Yeah,
sheets.
yeah, that could work. Or even the what are the rock people called? Oh my,
Savas.
Savas. Yeah, you can make Savas and say you pretend that the shards didn't exist. But you make the shards this one, so you make them like really strong, but like that weak kind of core, right? Uh, but yeah, I don't know. I think that would be a very different way of making a tanky character. And then you could play around with that resource to have its damage output. Because this is the other part of Haven tanking is that every character has to have some way of contributing to the damage to contribute to the scenario moving forward.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. Okay.
which was actually a good comment made by someone in our Discord or a couple of people through that discussion was tanking's different in Haven because like one of the things is that everyone needs to be like moving towards a goal, right?
Correct.
Like you can't just stand there and take damage, which is in MMOs we were talking about. Sometimes the role is literally just to stand there and not die. Right, so everyone else can kill it. With Haven, everyone needs to contribute. So I think that was a really good point. That's where it differs. Is that yes, tanking is a thing in Haven, but you still need to be moving. You need to be killing stuff still, right? Or doing something to help people kill shit.
Absolutely. I think it's definitely because a lot of people will be coming from whether it be video games or other board games, etc. And you've got your archetypes generally in most dungeon crawl games of your frontlining, they're a generic shield wielding, sword wielding, and then you've got your mage and, things like, I'm not very well versed in D&D, but it's that kind of, that archetype role. And I know it doesn't fully exist like necessarily in the Haven series, but that's part of the discussion of if you had to categorize them, which characters fulfill which kind of role more than others, because they're not all going to be created equally.
Yeah.
So Office Scenario 13, this is our scenario recap. First, we start off with our city and road events, and these were really, really, they're funny. They're really funny. And it's all centered around the world of the sunken market or the sinking market or whatever. This place has suddenly become the most important venue in the Haven series right now. And we just keep pulling events that have something to do with either the sinking market or going off into the wilderness and finding a merchant. Like there's always someone who's selling us something or giving us a choice between 2 different things.
Yeah, it's really become Merchant Haven, hasn't it?
100%. So we started off with the city event. This is number 7. While wandering through the sinking market, I almost read that as stinking. We suddenly find ourselves surrounded by wild turkeys. Suddenly we find ourselves surrounded by wild turkeys. And a vermling named Gables, the turkey wrangler, emerges and explains that he trains these turkeys for combat, and he offers to sell us one at a discounted price of 10 gold. So it's kind of like, well, obviously we pick a turkey. And I think the options, the way it was worded was inquire about their flavor or offer to buy a battle turkey. And I was like, it's a battle turkey. how do you not pick the battle turkey?
Yeah.
So we ended up going with a battle turkey, which ended up being, like you said, once you saw the response, probably one of the strongest summon pets that we've ever seen in the game.
It was. It was. It had enough HP to not die and had a decent attack.
100%. 5 health, 2 move, 2 attack, PS2. Like, that's better than nearly every pet.
Yeah. If we had got that when we were up against like the water spirits, that actually would have just been like carving through them, right? That's true damage.
Totally.
So,
And we gave that to
what
Mark.
was the other option, by the way?
Oh, I
if
just
we had
said
chosen delicious meal.
had no effect. You inquire about their flavor, and Gables looks around nervously. Oh, as he places the turkey down behind him. These are specially trained turkeys. How dare you suggest eating one? Ah, he exclaims in a loud voice. His voice softens as he says, do you know what it would do to my reputation if people started eating these? He turns to walk away, but not before flashing you a wink and whispering in your ear, quite delicious.
I love it. That's so good. That's so good. I gotta say, I think the writing has been really good in Crimson Scales, and I don't know. I mean, it was fine in Gloomhaven. I think it was quite good in Frosthaven as well. So I think it definitely seems like an area that they wanted to up. Like again, I say improve. Like it wasn't bad, but yeah, Crimson Scales kind of took it to a new level, and has been funny and interesting. And I think Frosthaven continued that kind of trajectory.
It's a good point. The flavor, it's just those little moments. I feel like sometimes, or most times, left out on purpose, just because it's a little too maybe out of the box, a little too tongue in cheek, etc. But not being afraid to go in there with this, well, has just it just completely makes it. So big fan, big fan.
That's good.
And then our road event, we traveled at night. We spot a bright flash of light near and hear a loud shattering noise from a nearby cave. Investigating further, we find an abandoned merchant cart inside, and that's when we laughed and was like, oh, of course, there's a merchant. But inside the cave, there was a fight between a merchant and his guard against an orchid. And a sack of glowing red crystals were lying on the ground between them. As we examine the scene, the orchid, covered in massive crystalline growths, breaks off a shard of its skin and prepares to hurl it at us. Meanwhile, the merchant seizes the sack and attempts to flee. So it was asking us, do we engage the orchid, who has just broken a bit of herself off and then wants to throw it at us, or do we want to stop the merchant in his attempt to flee with the crystals? And if there's a theme with our choices, it's always the one that looks more interesting, that we think is potentially more far-fetched. And I got to say, our luck with these decisions in the last few weeks have always been fairly good. We've really rarely run into the ones where we've gone, damn, we lost the 50-50 and now we start with all these problems. And it kind of continues with this one because we wanted to help, as you said. We helped and we got collective 15 gold. And she's saying, hey, these are really important for the order of the shard renders or something like that. And we're like, oh, Phil's not here. Oh, that's the other thing. We didn't even explain that on the playthrough, but Phil couldn't make it in that session, so we had to go astray.
We should have just not said anything at all, right? And just don't even acknowledge that he's not there, and people would be like, "Wait, what?" Yeah, it's good. It's good. Although I feel like in Haven, the Haven world, and these events, people have this knack for when they are engaged in some kind of altercation or combat. If we walk in, suddenly they turn their attention to us. It's like two people are fighting and someone else enters to be like, hey, what's going on here? And then one or both of them are suddenly like, you're my guy now, right? And it's like, whoa, hang on. You were literally in a fight to the death with this other person. I'm just standing here.
Yeah, I'm just standing here wanting to have a chat, see what's going on, but all of a sudden both of your threats have dropped on each other and now it's on us. And all of a sudden I'm the worst thing in the world.
That's it. Like it happened in the first scenario where it was like the water spirits and the vermlings are fighting each other. And we were like, dum-de-dum, walked up to this lake and they're like, oh, quick, everybody, let's band together and kill those people over there. It's like, what?
They're ruining our duel, basically.
Yeah, that's it.
So scenario 13 started off hilariously because we were wandering through the sinking market again. Somehow we had done a bit of both. We'd left already, had an adventure in a cave. The scenario was kill a merchant or something like that and take his thing back that we happened to do during a road event, come back, and then we're back in the sinking market. And it's just That's where we're starting to build a theme here. After rescuing Sanka, I think it was Sanka, the Quattril from that fortress from Scenario 9, we had no real signposting as to where to go. It opened up 3 scenarios. It opened up a couple of, I don't remember the numbers, but I wasn't too sure where we were going to go. And you had a look at the book and you said, oh, let's just do this one. And I was like, cool, why are we here? And it didn't really explain it towards the end of the last one. But we go to the sunken market and Sheila comes out of nowhere and she's like, hey, obsessive girl meme, whatever it is. And she's like, hey, remember me, by the way? She's a mixer, she's an alchemist, and she wants us to get a nice rare mat called hanging moss or something like that. And it's in a scary cave, and she's scared of the cave. So she wants us to go and deal with it, which makes sense. So we head back out into another cave. Cave Haven. Our goal for the scenario was to kill all of the enemies, and that was easy. It was a 3-tile room, difficult terrain all over the place. In the case of water, which I did mention to you in the future, when I see that for the setup, that information should probably go to everyone. Like how many tiles of a certain type is around, because that would probably also help with maybe card choice.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, look, I think that makes sense. If I had more specific things like ignore hazardous or ignore difficult terrain cards, I probably would want to know that. But
yeah,
I didn't get stuck there because of difficult terrain. I got stuck because I'm an idiot.
True. It does play a bit in monster movement though, like difficult terrain. Sometimes they struggle to move as quickly, or I don't know. I'm trying to help you out here. You're not an idiot.
No, I appreciate the help. I can see that, like, yeah, I'm digging myself into a big hole, and you're like, hey, did you want to hop out now? I'm like, no, I reckon if I keep going, I'm going to find gold. And you're like, nope, you're not. So, no, I appreciate that. But no, yeah, it was a player decision.
We had monster combination of oozes, lurkers, and living corpses. I can't remember the last time I've seen living corpses. I know they're not in Frosthaven, so that's probably the main reason. They've been included.
They got replaced by Yetis, right?
Yeah, the frozen corpses, and we haven't seen them yet in Crimson Scales, I believe.
I don't think so.
Do you have memories of living corpses and whether or not they were dangerous? Because this was like years between visits for me, and I wasn't too sure what to expect.
Yeah, I think I remember them from Gloomhaven when I played through in the digital. Yeah, not really at low level. I feel like at low level they don't move very fast. And they have this weird habit of like 50% of the time not doing anything. Like, so I don't remember them being that dangerous. They just have a decent HP, but I think you can get overwhelmed by them.
Yeah, that's true. And the special rules for the scenario was that the living corpses have target too, and everyone starts with poison. Remember, so that was a bit weird.
That made them a bit more dangerous, yeah, because they have a couple of decent sized attacks, and so that landing on 2 people is a bit gross.
Yeah. So how did the scenario pan out? We kind of stayed in that first room for a bit, no problems. It was actually no problems. That first room was easy.
No.
It was like 3 rounds. And then I go into the second room by myself. Mm-hmm. And you guys are backing me up. Mm-hmm. Backing me up.
So the first mistake, okay. So we cleared the first room pretty quickly. I did some retaliate shielding stuff, and it was all going fine. We were doing well. Remember, it's just the 3 of us, so it was kind of this little bit of a different balance of going, I am more tanky now because, well, I had to, I think it was a tank, but I wanted to frontline a little bit more because I have a decent amount of HP, Mark's on a new character, and you're also pretty squishy, and we don't have fill, right? So we didn't have the shard render. You were going to be our main source of damage, so it definitely also mean that we need to protect you a little bit, but also set you up to be able to do that, right? Like put you in positions where you can optimize your damage. And we had to kind of figure out how Mark was going to play because he played the one scenario where he did a bit supporty stuff, which was cool. He did some decent damage in that last one, but he's still figuring it out. We cleared the first room pretty easy. It wasn't that much of an issue. And the first mistake I made was I had a movement and I could move up to the door or I could move onto the door, right? And I think you ended up taking the spot next to the door. So I was just like, oh, I'll use my extra movement. I'll just land on the door and open the door. So I landed in the doorway. When we opened up the next room, a lot of things were quite close. So the the corpses were quite close to the door. Mm-hmm. There was one ooze which was in like range to hit us, and there was a couple of crabs that were over the other side of the room, so they weren't really a problem. But there was all this water in the middle, right? So it was kind of a bit chockers there. So the corpses moved forward and then just like absolutely demolished me. Like they think they did their attack fives and they just hit really hard. So I went from being on about 12 HP, I reckon it was, down to 2. And so I went from this, okay, was fine, and now it's probably not fine. All my defensive stuff was down. I could have long rested and got like 2 HP back in my cards, but I probably would, yeah. So on my turn, I think I took the option of moving back. I think I had one more turn. So I moved back out of the doorway, right? After you jumped in and you started doing your DPS stuff. And then Mark kind of filled the doorway with one of his pets, I think. I think it was the battle chicken.
Yeah.
Went forward, right?
The chicken was good.
Battle turkey, yeah. But then basically the problem is we had the doorway hex, which had one of us in it, or which, had one of the summons in it, summons behind that, and then us behind that. So me and Mark had his dog up and he was riding his bull,
Yeah.
right? And he had the battle turkey. So there's 3 people essentially that take up space because you can be on the same hex as his bull and me. So there's 4 of us all trying to get into one space.
Yeah. And
right?
on the other
tricky.
side of it, you've got the 2 living corpses. So they're blocking the space because they're attacking the door. So therefore, no other monsters can then find a focus to go through it. And the characters can't come either, but you're at the mercy of the chicken. And also the thing with living corpses is they've got like, I think 2 or 3 cards in there that don't attack. They're just doing damage to themselves. And then, yeah. So it kind of made it annoying when you were setting up those retaliate turns with Mark, with the ants and all that kind of stuff. It just wasn't working. That was the countering part, where every time you had something set up and planned, they would counter it by not doing something.
Yep, that's it. Yeah, so it was just a whole bunch of stuff like that I couldn't really get in there and do anything. Occasionally, like I could throw a heal or I could put something down, but it wasn't anything effective. I couldn't use any of my damage reduction, or a lot of my retaliate cards was tricky to get off because if I did manage to get the positioning to get one, there was a low chance that they were going to attack, or they killed the thing, or they pushed the thing. There was just a whole bunch of stuff going on that kind of screwed us up. Mark was in a similar situation, though, to a degree. Like, he was also struggling to find 2 actions a turn to do, because he had some where he could move some things around, or he could grant attacks or do a heal, but it wasn't always lining up where he was able to kind of have effective actions. So it kind of was a bit shit. Well, you were on the back in the other room, right? Like killing things, trying to survive, trying to not get hit, trying to stay invisible forever, right?
Yeah.
Going like, guys, anytime, guys, like it would be great. And it wasn't until we broke through that we were able to, do it. But by that stage, you'd pretty much killed everything.
Well, I mean, Mark did eventually push through. The problem is I was 2-button memeing so much out there because I'm trying to work out when do I burn and when do I not burn. And a lot of the times it was like, well, am I going to burn a card? I'm conscious that we still had a whole other room to open. So it was like, how much am I going to have left for that? So I didn't want to unload. But even unloading on me, most of it's on one target. It's not like I'm doing lots of AoE. I mean, sometimes I'm attacking multiple times, but my AMD is just still giving me grief. I'm not missing as much, but it's still giving me so many +0s and so many -1s, despite the fact that I have like heaps of green cards and bonus stuff in there as well. So, and a lot of my cards that I was playing were rupturing and wounding me. So every now and then I needed a little top up from you guys, like through the doorway as I'm screaming in there, weaving in and out of invis. So look, it was definitely a stressful kind of headache, but eventually, yeah, you guys breached. And look, it took a hot minute, but we did. We did.
And I think at the point of breaching through, potentially, I did ask the question if we should restart, because I think it was about 8 o'clock, which means we would have had time to restart and go again. I had heaps of cards, but I also don't have a lot of high impact cards. Like if you guys both died and it was up to me to win, I don't think I have the cards to do it, just purely because, like, it's not like I'll just burst them down and hopefully I don't die. But you were like, nah, let's keep going. We'll be fine. Because you were running lowish on cards.
I wasn't thinking we would be fine. I was like, I can't be bothered resetting it. I was thinking more along the lines of that. And if we lose, we lose, was what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's fair. So, but then we opened the door and there was 3 monsters. I was just like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, what, 2 crabs and a like living
Yeah,
corpse?
right near the door. They were
I
just near
think
the door,
something like
ready
that.
to be
Yeah.
engaged.
I think there we opened the door, Mark moved back, the living corpse moved forward, and we just like insta killed it. And then like we basically just went in and I stood next to one of the crabs and just punched it and it punched itself for a bit. And you killed the other one and Mark went and got the chest and then it was done.
Yeah, it was done. That
So I mean, like that last room was really good considering I didn't think we had the stamina to get through it if it was harder, but it was also very lackluster. But like, I feel like if I hadn't been shit the whole scenario, then that would have been even more of a letdown.
yeah, it's a good point. Like if we had smashed through the second room and then went through the third room, we'd be having difficulty discussions again. But there are things that are popping up, which is holding that thought just a little
Like
bit.
this guy,
No,
like
just in
yeah,
general, there's something that comes up. I mean, look, I'm gonna be real. Doors. Now that you and Mark are trying to work out how you function around each other and all that. Mark now has a menagerie now that's going with him. Doors are going to appear in a lot of scenarios because obviously the issue we ran into wasn't the scenario; it's just a door kind of
correct.
situation and just mobs being in there, which it really could have been anything, right? So yeah, is this something that how are we going to plan that? I guess moving forward, what is the right? I mean, I suppose you would bring that card and you would jump over, right?
I'd bring that card, yeah, or get better, different boots, yeah. So well, which I actually could because the boots I have, I bought because Mark had the other ones. So I've got the striding boots, so I get like what +2 to move. I could just change them for the ones that are better than those ones that say +2 and jump, right? And then I don't have to worry about that anymore
Ever again?
ever again. So we'll see how we go, but I think we have. It reminded me just then of like I reckon in our first 10, 20 scenarios of Frosthaven. I reckon it might have been really early. We had a sound bite that came out of this exact situation
Ah,
that went along something along the lines of like some fuckhead's blocking the door.
yeah. Fuck is
Because
blocking the
someone
door.
stood in the door and just would not move. And I feel like that's exactly what this was. It was probably more because of the monsters, not one of us. But it just reminds me, we were spamming that. So it was. It was like if this was a digital game, if this was a digital game and you only had emotes, you couldn't actually type, right? Like the Hearthstone style thing where you can just like make your character say a tagline. I reckon I would just be spinning that wheel, emote wheel, going some fuckheads blocking the door,
Over and
blocking the
over
door,
and
blocking the
over
door.
again.
Yeah, yeah.
We had an interesting chat, I think, before, and it might have been before we started recording around some of your cards. You mentioned Encasing Webs is a card that you wanted to get some use out of, but you didn't want to immobilize people. Encasing Webs is the top of it, level 1 card, or X, I'm not too sure. Heal 5, and then immobilize. So it's, and it got me thinking about the times where we have those negative aspects to it. Think of Geminate and other characters that sometimes will give you a positive benefit to it, but also a negative. Or here's a big damaging thing that it's going to hit everything, but it's unfortunately also going to clip you. And how we should not be afraid to look into them and use them, because it's part of that. It's the same thing with positions and dealing with those formations for the banner spear. When we start openly communicating what we need with that, we can make best use of it. And that's what we kind of did with Encasing Webs. You brought it along and it was great. 5 heal. And provided we planned around the immobilize, it became really clutch, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts around, like, I guess these negative cards and, well, they're positive and negative cards, and maybe opening our mind to taking advantage of using them a little bit more in the case of Encasing Webs, and I'm sure there are more coming.
Yeah, I think it's a good call. Like it always, because we play so nice.
Mm.
I guess like we don't really. If you had this scale of PvP versus like I don't know co-op, and the Gloomhaven is on that scale, we're very very much on the end of co-op where we try to help each other, and I think that's why when someone books someone's battle goal or something like that, it becomes such a big like, ooh, you did a thing, right? Because it's not the norm. But yeah, we can probably play around with that with a bit more communication. Like I don't we don't have really have any characters that put wounds and stuff on people at the moment. I mean, you've got one that can put rupture on people, but we probably don't need to be as afraid of those things as normal.
No.
I think things like poison are really bad if you have no way of healing it off.
Unless you're you. Unless we're
Well, no,
dancing
no,
at them.
that's it. Poison for me is fine, right? But if somebody has like I don't know, if someone has no way of healing their poison off and they're going to go in there and just get punched a bunch, then you don't want that. But yeah, I think it's just communication.
Yeah, I mean, but normally the mindset is when you see a card and it's like you've got that Retribution of the Hive or something. It's like a move to put Retaliate on someone and muddle them, or a top. There's a
The
top card that
Madding
does that.
Chatter, yeah, it's the top one.
That's
Yeah,
right.
the Retaliate 3
But
and, Muddle.
when you see those cards, you're less likely to either A, bring them along because you don't want to, cause a random muddle for someone, or, B, just struggle to use it effectively when we should be open to allowing you to use it effectively, especially if it's part of your kit and not thinking, you know what, I don't want muddle, never put it on me.
Yeah. I think the thing that I struggle with that encasing webs a little bit, but I never really brought it. I think I brought it once and then I didn't use it. And so I was just like, we don't really need heals. And I think at the time we didn't because Mark on the chain had so much self-sustain that he didn't need my heals as well, right? And everyone else was kind of able to keep themselves alive. So it wasn't a necessity. I think I brought it this time for some reason. I don't know why. But I think it did work quite well. I think I probably maybe used it 4 times in the scenario, which is, I mean, 20 healing's a fair bit. But I think with like Maddening Chatter, for example, which is the so it's like a range 3, one ally within range 3 gains like Retaliate 3, but also gains Muddle. The thing I struggle with that is that I feel like I have to tell too much about what I'm doing to organize it. And so we start getting into this place of like, I feel like we're kind of breaking the rules in a way.
That's not a rule break though, unfortunately.
I know,
Yeah.
but I'm just explaining why. Like, I don't like talking about this more. And it's with the banner spear of like, hey, can someone stand here? Or the galaxy, like, someone stand here. I didn't need to say why,
Yeah.
right? Or I could say, hey, if you stand here, you're going to get heals, right?
Yeah.
I think that's fine in a sense because you don't know what card I'm playing on. It's something in the initiative. It's just like, hey, can you do a thing? Can you go there? With this one, it's like, hey, I want to give you Retaliate but Muddle. And then you'd be like, oh, okay. And that kind of gives away my whole turn in a way. And then it's just tricky because I'd rather you do your turn and me plan around going like, well, I'm going to figure out that the enemies are going to go after me and hit you or the summon. And I'm just going to give it Retaliate without me having to really plan that out. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, totally. 100% I get what you mean because I'm in the same boat.
Yeah.
I don't want to reveal too much about what I'm doing. I think we all like that moment of, okay, so it's Daddy's turn. I'm like, okay, well, let's see what I can do. I haven't really gone too much up other than telling that this guy, I'll deal with this guy, right? And it's how we like that. Otherwise, it's almost like we've just, once everyone's revealed their cards or once we've discussed the planning phase, it just then press play and it just happens. And it's fun to have those turns and those thinking kind of moments. And it's definitely probably unique to our group because I'm almost certain most people will reveal legally everything else about, their turns and what they're intending to do. I do think because I'm in the same boat as you, and sometimes even recently, I think there was one where you're like, "Hey, are you going to do this?" And I'm like, "Nah, I'm not too sure which one I'm going to attack." So, and you're like, "But can I stand here?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, I don't know which one's going to be available." That's because it was the full health thing, and I could just say that, but for some reason I didn't, right? Because there's that fear of revealing too much. But then you look all the way down the other direction, and you've got Snowflake who has birds, and we're not afraid to say, hey, it's the birds around.
We were though, right? Like there was like I think we both were kind of like, this is ridiculous now, right? Like it was getting to the point where it was pretty much, I mean, saying, hey, can you give us birds was it? But then anyway, I agree. There's probably more and better communication. And I think the immobilized component of that, like. I took Maddening Chatter and I didn't care. I was just like, oh, whatever, I'm going to give everyone Muddle. I don't care, right? And then it actually came up during the scenario. Mark got a bit like, you got to tell me these things because I didn't exactly tell him. I was like, I'm going to give you Retaliate. He's like, oh, great. I'm like, and Muddle. He's like, wait, I'm attacking twice. You have to tell me these things. So I was like, okay. The encasing webs, I think I went to bring it, but then because of the immobilize, I'm like, I feel like this is going to be real awkward and I don't want to be immobilizing people like at the wrong time, but maybe it is going into a turn someone's on 1 HP or low HP. It's like, hey, I can get you out of there. You're just going to be immobilized, so plan your turn around that, right? And you're right. Like maybe that's the case. It is just a like
It's
like a get out of jail card in a way. It's like I can get you out of there and heal you, but you got to plan around not moving.
it's probably incredibly good on Mark because if Mark's immobilized but he's on a mount, it doesn't matter. His mount will still move.
That's also a really good point.
Like
Or
that's an assumption on how it works, right? I imagine because you're now mounted, I think that's the status of what you're on. Even though you're immobilized, you're not using a move ability. The mount is. This could be a
Yeah.
thing we need to double check. But it may not
Yeah, I mean,
bother him at all.
yeah, it's a good point actually. It's a good point. Or what I can do, because the other cool thing on encasing webs is I can see you smiling, like you know that I'm going to say something stupid.
Yeah, I'm waiting for it.
Is encasing webs is a heal 5 at like range 3, and it's got a pull 2 on it.
Yeah.
So I can pull Mark's mount from under him.
No. Oh, yeah, if you target the mount. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Or, I mean, even with Mark, I could pull him off the mount.
To heal Mark and tell him, hey, I'm helping you out and getting you out of danger.
Yeah. I'll be like, oh, your bull's almost dead. Don't worry, I've got that. I'll heal your bull. And then I'll pull it out and immobilize it. And he's like, mate, that's not good. That's not what we want.
All right, I got 2 questions for the end of the scenario, and then we can go on to our thoughts. So with Phil there and the menagerie and the card selection that you picked, would we still run into that issue?
Yeah, more. Phil would have been standing next to me doing nothing.
Phil does have the orb of agility, though. So he does have a jump. It's whether or not he doesn't like tanking, though. He doesn't like taking damage. So there's a world where I go in and I'm like, "Hey, Phil, are you coming in with me?" And I can see him just going, "No, it's okay. I'll deal with the lurker in the door along with the rest of the menagerie, right? The rest of the pets." But I think he would come.
Yeah. I don't know how many more there would have been in the second room if because I know you mentioned on 4 players there were more mobs in the last room, but if there were more in the second room, I actually think maybe it would have been better with Phil there because he does have a couple of range attacks. He's got good pierce, so I feel like we probably clear a space in the doorway earlier, and then like once there's a space, like one of us could run through. But yeah, I don't know. It could have been either just as bad. And he would have been there standing next to me going like, well, this is shit. Or he could have cleared it and then helped us get through. So,
Yeah, well, he also needs 3 rounds to get ready, so he probably wouldn't have blocked anything, really. Let's go into your and my thoughts on this scenario 13.
Like, it was fine.
Are you afraid to slam it at all, or?
No, not at all. I don't think there's anything wrong with this. Like, it had like some monsters random combination of monsters that we don't see all that often. It had a bunch of water tiles which made that room weird to position in. The shape of that second room was odd in that it had water over the other side, but so we didn't have to go there. Like it's that big water part in the middle of the room, kind of, but the door to the next room was in the same side as the door we came through. So basically, we didn't even need to worry about the water. That was more just to stop the monsters, I guess. I don't know.
Perhaps, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. Like, it was fine. Like, it wasn't bad at all. All of my negative thoughts about that scenario are purely based on my stupid decisions. So I feel like that's hard to hold it against that scenario. But I don't know. Again, this is one of those ones that if I was gonna do a top 10, top 20, it's not gonna. If I did a top 50, bottom 50, it probably isn't making it any of those either.
Okay, hold that thought for 2 seconds. I thought it was a very average scenario, enhanced by our situation and our experience, right? So it's kind of like the scenario was like 5 out of 10, etc. But our experience was more like a 7 out of 10, just because, and I'm using ours collectively, just from, that obviously things made it amusing or made it more challenging or made it memorable. And I think that's the thing, memorable. I will remember it as the door scenario, right? But then, yes, you would have it obviously way worse as an experience.
Yeah, I think if we're averaging it out, you might give it a 7 and I give it a 2. So we end up back at a 5, right? So,
well, you kind of answered this at the start. Is this officially the worst scenario for you that you've experienced out of all of Frosthaven and now up to here?
I don't know, maybe. I mean, the one with my Geminate where like died in the first 7 rounds,
You're
which
going
was
for your
kind of on purpose.
mastery.
Yeah, it was kind of on purpose, but it sucked because not only did I feel like I let the team down and couldn't contribute to what was in the end a very difficult scenario, but I also had to sit there for an hour and a half and watch you guys play Frosthaven, which wasn't fun either. So that was pretty shit. This one this one was just frustrating. Like it was just a whole bunch of doing nothing and me not. It's like Frosthaven is and Gloomhaven and etc. They're puzzles, right? Like it's all puzzles, and so you look at the pieces you have, and it was like I don't have any ability to affect this. Like the closest we ever got to was like, hey, maybe if this moves here and this moves here, I can put a colony down there and give that thing +1 to attack. Like there was like a puzzle, but the payoff was so bad. So yeah, I don't know, not the worst, but it definitely.
Yeah.
I don't know. I reckon that there's Frosthaven scenarios that we have won where I have done things that I thought were a worse experience than this.
Oh wow. Yeah. Okay.
Like, there's some pretty, not many, but there were a couple of real bad ones in there.
I think that'll be a fun video to do one day. It's just like in 10, 15, 20 years, once we wrap up amDirt and it's done, we'll do a top 10 worst scenario experiences ever and have to delve back. Although by that stage, my memory will be shocking and I won't remember any of it. But Frost who? What?
Yeah, what's that? What's a Haven? Yeah, that would be fun. We probably could do that now. I think I remember a few of them, but that like I reckon the ones that I've had the worst experience in have just been boring. Like and that's where it's not a bad experience. It's just like I rocked up to play a game that I enjoy playing with my friends once a week, and then I just got to do nothing.
But how was that boring? The puzzle was there. You were literally entertained every round trying to solve the puzzle. How
There
was that
was no
boring?
solution. There was no solution.
That's
It
the
was like
puzzle. You have to come up with a solution.
no, but like it's a puzzle without a solution. That's the problem. Is that like it wasn't okay, I need to figure this out. I've got these pieces. Yeah, cool. I can find an avenue. It was like there are 3 lines of like figures between me and the room. I can't get through them. Right? And the thing is, not without quarterbacking the shit out of it.
Yeah.
Because one of the things we could have done, and I'm not suggesting that Mark should have done this, but this is like if I was playing this single player, to get my character or to get the beetle into that room, right? The best way I could see doing it was get Mark's character, or the bull, to move forward. It's got natural push on its attack. Push one of those guys out, and then I try and blitz through the door in that space in that turn. We'd have to line up initiatives, and we have to make sure that there's the thing. But that's too much organizing, and also it puts Mark really out of position because he didn't want to be in the front line, right? So it's like, yes, there is a solution, but it was a crap solution.
Yeah.
Like it probably means that we like take heaps of damage and are very out of position. So yeah.
There was one turn, because I'm still editing the playthrough, there was one turn where his bull did attack, and he goes, oh yeah, I can push it. And he moved it back out of the doorway. And it was like, yeah. Oh, but wait, I want the ants +1, right? From the mill. And he goes, nah, I'll bring it back. And it was like, oh, almost. So yeah.
Almost, yeah. And there was the other one as well where he had...
The Hound?
I had... Pardon?
Was it the Hound one?
Yeah. So I played a card that's like you get to move 3, I think, and you can move 1 ally 3 as long as they end adjacent to a colony. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I'll move this back 1 so there's a slightly more space for us to get into. Then I put Retaliate on the chicken that was in the door, and the chicken got punched, but the the corpses had pulled their push card.
1, yeah.
Push 1. So they pushed into the space that the dog was in, which wouldn't have gone in if I hadn't moved it. And it would have taken 3 retaliate damage and probably died. And it made a space. I'm like, okay, cool. Like I'm just, not only am I put myself in the position, but I keep making the worst fucking decisions. All right. I just further, let's like Homer trying to pull his arms and legs out of the tar, right?
But it's fair to say, You wouldn't change anything though from this is how we play the game. We're not about to alter. Now we're going to do full open information, all that kind of stuff. You wouldn't. You are happy with the way that we're running the game and all of that, right? You wouldn't change that.
Yeah, I'm not gonna make people change how they play because I've done dumb things. That's just silly. So yeah, no, of course. I just learn from my mistakes. Bring jump.
There is one way that we could have made this scenario even worse. If we bring Ormi.
I think he's fine. He's just stuck, like next to me, being like, "Hey, this is shit." Turns out being a hero or an adventurer isn't very exciting. I'm like, no, it's just heaps of waiting.
He might accidentally stomp on your ants, though.
Yeah, he probably would have actually. Yeah, if Ormi comes, like Ormi would be the worst with this character. He'd just be like, "Oh, I stood on some ants. Now they're all over my shoes."
Yes. So quickly, amDirt Diaries with Bleeding Claw and any beetle stuff. We've obviously covered a bunch of beetle stuff, but if there's anything you wanted to add, I just wanted to say that this most recent one, I haven't really gone over, I guess, all of the cards in a while, and I keep doing that when we have a card. When we're setting up the scenario, I'm going through all of my selection, and and I'm picking cards based on what I think I'll need for any given scenario, based on maybe monster type or the layout or something. The one thing that I'm ignoring is the balance between sated burns, like lost cards that are going to make me sated, and then being able to take advantage of those. I only have like two staples that I like to go to, one being Fatal Frenzy for the double 3 attack, and I probably need to be a little bit more aware of top and bottom and finding a nice balance. Because that last scenario, when I went in, I was like, even though I can go sated again, I don't really have a lot of good cards right now to take advantage of that. And I think that's the next step in my learning journey of how it's kind of going. The ratio just kind of felt a little bit off. That was all.
Yeah, okay. Well, you did add a card, right? Like you added that cornered
The line way
card.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which doesn't have a sated trigger on it, or it's not a burn either. So that is one of the reasons why it then removes another option from the actual burst. See, that's what I got to.
Yeah,
that's what I got to think about.
Interesting. I'm actually quite surprised at the depth of the decision making in that character, because I think when I first saw it, I didn't think it looked easy, but it definitely looked like a burn cards get powerful thing, right? Like, which seems like conceptually very easy, but I think there's it looks like a lot of thought has gone into how that combos, and not how it combos to make you like super mega ultra powerful. It's more how does it combo to make sure that you can't just, there's not a very linear one line of play, right? Burn this, attack, do heaps of damage. Burn that, attack, do heaps of damage. Like, you actually do need to think about which cards you bring and what you burn when, which is cool. Like, I think that's a good it's a good design. It's good design to that has that level of depth in it.
Yeah, and I think one of the other issues is when I do play a top, like Burn, for example, the Invis one, Savage Stalker, that's a lost card that's going to create, make me sated. Which means if I compare that with a bottom that has a sated bonus, that will be even better, because you want to squeeze that extra, when you get sated, I want then my next 3 actions to all have sated bonuses. But then I need to then get in the right position to then do that top attack, which means I may not be sated for that top attack. I'll only get sated twice for the following up turn. So that's a whole other puzzle I'm playing with. Burn a card, which means the next 3 cards I play, I'll be sated, but a lot of the times I can't do that. So it's like another balancing act of just trying to squeeze as much as I can out of the sated status.
Yeah, cool. Updates from betas, I just still have no idea what I'm doing. So
I love this. I think this is like, look, I'm loving it from number one, an entertainment point of view, but also it's like, you know how I have my father-in-law, we get him a little puzzle for his birthday. You know those little ones where it's like 2 pieces of metal intertwined and you got to sit there and work it out. And every time he gets it, I'm just like, oh, well, that's done now. Like, whatever. You're getting that puzzle right now, and you're sitting there and you're doing this and you're getting frustrated and all that. I'm like, yeah. And all I'm saying is, yeah, you're getting lots of usage out of my gifts because you can't work it out. So I'm seeing it positively that you haven't worked it out yet.
I'm glad that you're enjoying my frustration. Yeah.
So you're not bored. The tusk is pretty cool. I like the different variations of the mounts, and obviously the elemental synergy that you are creating with him, making emergency grass for each other. Seems to have decent damage as well.
Yeah, I'm surprised. From what I saw, I'm surprised. And I think we might have mentioned this last week, or it is doing a bit more than I thought it was going to. So, again, it just shows that it's really hard to evaluate a class's impact on the game based on just looking at the cards and reading the character sheet.
Mm.
So yeah, it's good. It's going well.
There is a part of me. I'm also still not used to that being Mark. Like I'm used to the character, but that not being Mark. I'm looking at the scenario in the door situation we were in, and it's like if the chain helm was there, he'd move 6, tap his boots, move 8, jump all the way into the room, and start swinging shit. Right? That's just what I
Yeah.
expect. And when that doesn't come in, I'm like, what's going on?
What happens next? Yeah.
All right, let's jump into our topic of the week: the Dee Pee Ess role. Do you know what Dee Pee Ess stands for, Gaz?
It stands for something about. I do. It's damage per second. I was trying to think on the fly something funny.
It's hard
Do you
to do
have
that.
something
I know
funny?
you were trying to do that. No, not really.
Yeah.
But I was quickly just looking up when did the word Dee Pee Ess become a thing, right? Because if it's damage per second, it's like, hey, are you a damage per second?
Yeah, yeah.
So I was like, where did that come from? And I found out that the game most frequently credited with solidifying Dee Pee Ess in the gaming lexicon is EverQuest, which was released in
Okay, that makes sense.
1999. So in complex RPGs with many players, different character classes, abilities, and equipment, players needed a way to measure and compare how effective they or others were at dealing damage. Simply looking at the damage of a single hit wasn't enough, as attack speed varied greatly. Dee Pee Ess provided a standardized metric to calculate the average damage output over time, factoring both the damage per hit and the speed of attacks. This allowed for better theory crafting, gear comparison, and strategy development, especially for group content like raids, which is pretty cool. Now it's like a universal term.
But you're right. I had never even thought of that as the. I knew what it stood for, but calling someone a damage per second. Like, I'm not a damage per second. I'm a damage per minute, right? Like,
Yeah. I always thought of them as damage dealers, but it's just like built into the lingo now, right?
yeah, exactly. So interesting.
But yes, they're pretty much the universal title given to a role that centers around dealing damage as opposed to absorbing damage, which is something already covered, or restoring health. But then the lines obviously can blur because now as games come out and newer systems come out, there's just hybrids of all sorts of stuff and all that kind of stuff. And it's very big in Frosthaven and Gloomhaven.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that interestingly with Frosthaven, with the Haven series, is that you need to do damage in order to achieve the goal, right? Like the monsters in almost every scenario need to die, or some of them need to die in order for you to be able to do the objective. A lot of the Gloomhaven and Crimson Scales are just kill-alls. Frosthaven saw like a pretty big shift away from kill-all, but there still was a bulk of the enemies you needed to kill in order to get to where you're going. Otherwise, you're just going to die. So every character needs some capacity to contribute to the damage dealt. Now, that can be pure numbers. So, like, I've got a cards that say attack on them, or it can be in a more supporting role of like granting other people attacks or buffing attacks or putting status effects out like wound and poison, etc., etc. But like, so I think that the role of Dee Pee Ess in Haven is different because it's more when it's like their pure role in the kind of composition is just to really apply damage, right? Compared to having more, like, it's almost like a Dee Pee Ess in the Haven series lacks the sustainability and or support roles, which we've discussed previously. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. There's like, because coming from, I think World of Warcraft's probably the biggest example of a game that we play, and it's known for having that holy trifecta or trinity of healing, tanking, Dee Pee Ess, etc. And then it kind of evolves from that into so many different games where you've kind of got damage dealers like burst damage, which is usually built around a rotation, and that is something that he's seen in the Haven series. You look at someone like Drill, for example. That's a classic burst character in that it ramps. You need to ramp up. And then you got things like sustained damage, which is like just that nice, consistent, boring kind of damage. And then you got damage over times, like you said, with poisons and wounds and all that kind of stuff. Single target AoE, interrupts with CC, buffs, debuffs, all that kind of stuff. Like the role itself has just evolved dramatically. And in the Haven series, yeah, I think it just takes on so many different facets, so many different, yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing is that, and yeah, you're right. It's like how the characters differ on how they're going to do their damage, rather than just the fact that they do damage. Like, because again, in other games, other genres, and you can use your role playing games in your D&Ds, or even tabletop games in some capacity, right? Like, the some have a role that is not to do damage. They might do damage on the side or as a like but that's not their role. But I think every character's role in Haven in some capacity is to do some form of damage. Usually, there's a couple of
Well, it's
exceptions.
built into like the default action, right? It's
Yeah, well,
literally
that's it. The difference is, though, I think becomes how they do it, right? And that kind of then evolves into it. Because if you think about some, and I know we'll talk about the classes in a sec, I feel like if you take the Blink Blade, for example, from a Frosthaven perspective, that for me, other than also looking like a rogue and playing like a rogue and being really quick, it really just screams all this character wants to do, right, is attack stuff. And when it's not attacking things, it's setting up to attack things, right? And so its defensive capabilities are less tanking and more just what do you do when you're not attacking things so that you don't die, right? So it's a very, I'll use the word selfish, but a selfish character in that it only really cares about itself. And I think that there's a fair few characters in Haven that do that, where you go, well, most of the ways to play them are not really interacting with the other players. They're just interacting with the enemies and the objectives. And I know that there are a couple of cards that the Blink Blade, for example, has that do impact allies, but there's not a lot of those, and they're not your go-to. You're not like, oh yeah, cool. Well, we've got this in the party, which means we're all going to be able to do X.
yeah.
Whereas it used the example of like the snowflake with birds, right? And I know it's a very unpopular decision to take birds because it's a terrible card. But the idea is that knowing that you have that, knowing that it has heal cards and things like that, you can go like, oh, we've got a snowflake in the party. That means there is the potential of this strategy. Like, one of the ways to bring that character into the party is to help everyone else. So I think that's kind of the thing that I look at. Some of the characters just aren't built to offer that extra
Totally.
support.
And you go in the scenarios as your party knowing that if I'm taking a lot of damage, I'm not looking at the Blink Blade for a heal. I'm ignoring the Blink Blade completely. It may have a heal. It may have one. I don't expect it to carry it, especially if it says heal ally. I don't expect it to carry it, but my eyes immediately go to the people that I know can do that as part of their role, potentially, but definitely not to that hard DPS. They've got a role. They've got a job. It's a very important job. And we kind of, let them do their job.
Yeah, that's it. And I think if we look at the starting party and then we look at a slight alteration of that, so we had the Chain Helm, right, which wants to punch things, wants to throw things around, wants to heal itself, but it's really not doing anything for anyone else. It's not throwing heals on other people. It's not doing those type of things, putting shields up for other people. It's really just like it's controlling the battlefield and doing a bunch of damage, right? And that does help the group. But I'm just talking about like, hey, Deddy, don't worry, I'm going to do this thing which is going to directly impact you. It's more like, hey, I'm going to swing this guy, I'm going to punch this guy, and then that's good for you. You had the what did you play? I always forget the name
Vortex,
of
washing
it.
machine.
Vortex. Yeah, which was much the same. It really didn't want to do anything for anyone else, right?
Apart from Sakisaki.
Great. Well, that was not.
That was taking health from other people, which
Yeah,
is
correct,
helping them
right?
if they wanted low health for a battle goal. So I am actually helping.
Yeah, so you have those two there where they were not really doing it. So you probably put the Chain Helm in that DPS tanky type role, and you put the Vortex in the DPS role, right? I think and it has some control elements and stuff which we haven't really talked about much, but let's just keep it simple. Then you look at the Galaxy and the Flask, right? Now the Galaxy, I think, had the capacity, like the way that I think Viking was playing it potentially in the amGood playthrough, as hard DPS, right? Because he's gone the advantage, he's gone the range attacks and stuff like that. So very, very DPS focus with some heals that they can do as well. So a little bit of DPS and the support part. Whereas the Flask kind of, the way we saw it, Phil was playing that very supporty DPS-ish. So they kind of all had a combination of those. Now, the way I played the Galaxy, though, was a lot more supporty. So it was a lot more supporty with a little bit of damage. if we just change that like dynamic a little bit and take away the flask and put in the shard render, the prism, whatever it's called, not prism, the
Gemstone.
gemstone. Yeah, that dynamic changes drastically because like I don't really think other than Phil's new card where he can jump through you and bless, I think it is. I don't think that he really has any cards that affect anyone else. So it's interesting that like the damage changes a little bit, right? But they it's really about like some of them just don't interact with other characters, and that's kind of the example I'm giving of like, well, they're all doing damage and they're all doing things, but some of them just don't have the cards to say, hey, help someone do something for someone else. And
Yeah.
those are the ones that I would probably put in the DPS bucket if we were having to classify things as a trifecta.
Yeah, okay. With
Does that
the
make sense?
yeah, yeah. With the DPS portion, right? This is from also a D&D question at the same time because it's not an area I know a lot. You can break it down further into melee and DP and ranged, right? And it's almost like, why would you ever go melee? Because obviously you're in the front line and range is safe and all of that. Can you explain, at least from that kind of world in a way? Because in Haven's also, if you're in the front line, you're going to get hit more than if you're in the back line. What are the advantages of, I guess, being melee?
I mean, I think it's the same in like MOBAs, though, like Dota, right? Like, what's the advantage of like say Ursa over Drow? Well, I mean, like one is if you sit back and you're unchecked, you can just sit there and do heaps of damage. But the other one is if you can get up in people's faces, you can really disrupt what those are doing. It's kind of like that rock paper scissors kind of aspect. D&D is a bit weird and has evolved over the time to like everyone's really just a DPS in a way. So because like everyone wants to do big
Yeah, of
numbers.
course.
And you can play support-ish, but like you still, and I don't think that ranged or melee in that are particularly better or worse, but there definitely are considerations of like, well, if you can't close the gap, then being melee, you're useless.
Yeah,
And
okay.
I mean, it's kind of the same in Haven, right? Like if you can close the gap quickly, like the chain helve is a perfect example. Could close the gap really quickly and control what it was doing, and it would really mess up what it was around. So it would have been really interesting watching the amDirt Good Crew play where they had like Viking being high range damage, and then they had I think Ricewind was playing the chain helm, yeah,
Yep.
playing that chain helm who was controlling it. So that combo works really well because he's landing there controlling everything. Then the galaxy's able just to ping away. But if you take away that front line, suddenly it becomes a lot harder to stand there and shoot. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
I was just thinking melee traditionally also, like even in the Haven series, you see a lot more, not universal, but a lot more single target abilities, like single target, but they're bigger. And a lot of the times with range, you're going to see a lot more AoE maybe, but they're usually lower in terms of damage individually, which sometimes is probably a thing as well.
Yeah.
But then, of
Yeah.
course, that whole rule can go out because of formations with Banosphere and Galaxy having formations that are a little bit like pseudo AoE, but in melee range a lot of the times.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'd say, and this is kind of going off topic a little bit, but I'd say that generally melee in almost anything, any medium I can think of, that any game that has a melee and a ranged mechanic that are separate, melee is usually harder,
I agree. I
right?
100% agree. And I'm looking at it now from a WoW point of view. Like even in WoW, melee versus range, a lot of the times when raids have mechanics and there's fire going out and attacks going out and things to dodge, range don't have to deal with that anywhere near as much as melee do. Melee
Yeah.
is just, watch out for this and that. You're right there with a giant boss in front of you and other party members around you. You can't see shit. You don't know what's going on around you. And you end up standing in something and you insta-die. And it's just like, oh. And then people are like, oh, the DPS, they really know. So it was always fun finding a raid where the range had mechanics where like there was like things disrupting them, and all I had to do was stand next to the boss. Yeah, that was great. I mostly played melee, so yeah, it was just
It's an
something.
interesting balancing factor though, and then even coming back to the Haven series with the range versus melee DPS is that like you got to make sure that that is balanced. And I think the good thing is because the characters are all so different and they all do different things. I don't think you need that balance as hard because there's probably some kind of internal rubric that determines like what should a ranged attack look like, what should a ranged AoE attack look like, and what should a melee attack look like in some capacity, so that you don't have like just ranged attacks just being the best. But
Yeah,
then you know, there's characters that are just based around it. Like I think the Doomstalker in Gloomhaven is just like all just ranged attacks, and like I found it to be really good and really boring, but really good because it was just like just move into this room and just shoot everything for like 5 turns, which is
Hmm.
interesting because yeah, but it was quite good. But yeah, you usually don't have a character that has both of those,
Yeah, okay.
like so it's interesting.
I want to talk a little bit about the DPS problem, right? Because, and there's a couple of things I want to highlight. One of them, BDE, Big Dick Energy, aka the Spotlight. This is
Yep.
something that I think is a DPS problem in that everyone wants the spotlight on them. If you think to a lot of games, the spotlight is on the biggest, flashiest plays, the most kills, all of that kind of stuff. And it has led to everyone wants a piece of the spotlight. Therefore, everyone wants to play DPS. And I think it's fair to say, I mean, WoW is a good example, and we keep going back there. A dungeon, just a regular dungeon, is made up of one tank, 3 DPS, and one healer. So
Yep.
it's not like you're ever looking for a DPS.
No, they're everywhere.
You have too many. And a
Too
lot of the
many,
times when it comes to
and they're all
queuing and all
shit.
of that.
Right, because everybody wants death spam, right? Like if you go to it, and this is not a DPS thing, but you play any game at all that you can kill people in, everybody wants their name next to like da 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 killed da 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 because
Yeah.
that's what people want to see. Nobody wants to see the support symbol, and that's why some games, I think like TF2, I don't know, I'm not gonna say that was the first one, but I do remember in that had actual call outs for when someone support killed something, and then you start bringing in stats like assist because if you don't do that,
Mm.
right, it becomes very much like who has the biggest numbers, and then the bloody penis, kind of fights happen across the internet, and then all the DPS are like, "I'm the best because I got more frags than you,"
Yeah.
right? But that's a DPS problem. That's the mentality of like, well, I'm the best at the game because I did the most damage.
Yeah. I mean, we had a DPS meter in Frosthaven, right? And then it
And why
became
did we get rid of it?
because it was causing problems.
Yeah,
Another thing is, I guess that coincides with it, self-centeredness, right? DPS generally are going to ignore the problem, and this could work in Haven series as well. They don't want to avoid damage or whatever because that becomes a healing problem. That's a healer's issue, and that's quite traditional in MOBAs and also in MMOs. Where the DPS is just like, well, this is my job. It's DPS. What do you mean I'm standing in the fire? Just heal me through it, right? I'm doing my bit. Do your bit. That kind of thing. Ego,
yep.
which is competitiveness, which can lead to toxicity. So that's another thing. But I mean, that could be really any class, right? Any class has an ability to be that way, but it's mostly DPS, I think we can say.
It does, but if you think about probably the most toxic gaming communities on the planet, which is like League of Legends and Dota, right? Like it's generally say MOBAs have the most toxic kind of fan base. Your most of your toxicity comes from your position 1 and 2, which is your mid, which is a DPS
Hmm.
usually, although metas change and stuff, and your position 2, which is your
Position two is
like the
mid,
two is mid, so 1 is
hard
your
carry.
carry. Yeah, hard carry. Yeah, so they're the two that are usually the most toxic because they're also the ones that want to be the DPS because they're the ones that want to be the best, and that's tends to be it. Like I don't know, it's yeah, it just seems to be drawn towards that, right?
100%. Absolutely. I think it comes, yeah, damage numbers you already mentioned with comparing and dick size and all that kind of stuff. I would dare say DPS classes traditionally, at least to get into, are the easiest. Number equal do something. Like to be a good tank or to tank in general, I think you need it has a higher skill ceiling. And same thing with healing as well. Whereas DPS is quite easy to get into. You press buttons, you push numbers, you see it in Haven, you see a sword, the bigger the number, the better it is, and you just play it, you just do it. And this is where Haven's excellent because it's given you all the characters are a unique almost puzzle. Some will have hoops, some will not. You will very rarely see a character that nowadays be designed under the idea of this is an attack 6, and that's it. Right?
Yeah.
And that's very cool that they've done that. Unfortunately, that's not in every game.
Yeah, but I think that's where you're seeing. I mean, we played that Fellowship game, and you're seeing it in like a lot of games now have star complexity ratings, right? And usually that's how hard is it to make this thing work, and that's kind of similar to Haven, except Haven makes you jump through hoops regardless of what you play. It's just the size of the hoops, but one's not better than the other. Right.
Mm.
And but yeah, you're 100% right. Like it's a lot of other games don't do that as much or as well. But yeah, you don't have this ability to be like, well, I'm playing the easy DPS, so I'm just going to do heaps more damage than you, right? It's probably more tailored to play style. I think characters are like per personal like player style is the bigger contributor of which one you want to play rather than just which one's better.
Mm.
Which I think is better for a game like Haven, because you're investing in stuff.
This is where
Right.
do you remember WoW? I think it was Wowhead. They used to bring out the raid numbers, and it was kind of like a chart for each patch of a whole bunch of data from in game and it would label every class and spec on a big chart. And the longer the bar was, the better it was performing, and it would change all the time. But it was like that alone dictated how people were going to play the characters that they had, or whether or not they were going to shelve a character and be like, well, it's crap this patch. I'm going to roll, what's the top? Marksman Hunter. All right, I'm going to play a Marksman Hunter. And yeah, because of all of this, and I think we've definitely talked about meta and all of that kind of stuff in the past, DPS traditionally get lost in this. You don't see that with necessarily with tanking and healing. Like you do, but
Yeah,
it
because
doesn't feel as big.
well, I guess it comes down to role, right? Like if like a tank needs to hold aggro and not die so that everyone else can do their jobs. A healer needs to keep everyone alive, sustained, so that everyone doesn't take damage because you inevitably take damage. And the role of the DPS is to kill the thing. And so I feel like the effectiveness of the DPS is usually measured a lot more, which is exactly what you're talking about. It's like having a graph to show who's the best and who's the lowest. Whereas if you're doing your role as a tank or as a healer, it probably doesn't matter as much. It's like, are you keeping everyone alive? Yes. Well, that's fine, right? Are you keeping everyone alive better than everybody else? Well, sure. Okay, then play that one if you want, but it's a more almost are they doing the job? They're a lot more binary, right? Can you do the job or not? Whereas the DPS tends to land in that case of like, oh no, well, I want the big numbers because that's what I want. I want to play the best thing. And I think because there's usually a lot more DPS classes in games than there are of the other roles, you kind of get this self-fulfilling prophecy in some capacity.
Mm.
Like it happens in like CCGs and that kind of stuff as well. It's like decks come out, characters come out, things come out where everyone says this is meta, so everyone plays it. So that gets more hours into it, right? Now that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be better, but it means that it gets iterated a lot more, and so people get better with it, right? Like, oh, this is the best DPS. Okay, well, I'm going to play this for 1,000 hours, right? And then you go, oh wow, for some reason this one's performing better. It's like, yeah, because you got a million people that have put like 100 hours into this in the last month compared to this other one where you've got 10 people who have put like not much. So it kind of becomes in a way like unless you can properly math it out, right? It does tend to just lean into this meta of like, well, that's better because everyone's playing it. In a way,
Mm.
there are exceptions, like, and you get that in MOBAs, right? You get characters that just overtuned, and you go, well, this is better because it's been buffed and they haven't nerfed it yet, and they need to nerf it, so it's just better. And that's kind of how that meta stuff evolves.
Is it safe to?
Re-
Oh yeah. If you,
no, no, yeah, yeah.
I was gonna say, is it safe to say that people are just looking at the end result? It's like pressing tab at the end of the game and looking at the score, and that's it. It's like, because my example of it is in the Haven series. Let's just put two damage dealers next to each other. Let's put something that's relatively simple. What's a really easy DPS, like a scoundrel or something like that, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, do you want to use Frosthaven or
What's an easy
Frosthaven?
Frosthaven character?
Well, I don't want to. Let's say the brute, I guess.
That's not Frosthaven either.
Oh, Frosthaven. Oh, okay.
You
All
said
right. I mean, the
Frosthaven.
drifter. The
Yeah,
drifter.
okay. We'll go
right?
Drifter. So you got Drifter DPS, like how much damage they can output, and then you got the Geminate, right? And then you got Hoops. So this is how games differentiate it. And WoW does it with every single damage spec. You've got dot specs, you've got burst damage and ramping, all that kind of stuff I mentioned. Are people like, when they look at the Drifter and they look at the Geminate and they see that the numbers are the same, they're both performing at a certain level, it's probably obvious that most people are then heading towards the drifter from they don't want to go through the hoops part of it, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by at the end of the game, they're like, cool, I managed to do as much damage as that person, but I didn't have to try as hard or I have to rack my brain as hard. And that's
Yeah.
where
100%.
complicated characters sometimes fall out of favor if they're too hoopy and have too much brain burn compared to an easier one.
Yeah, that's totally. I mean, you have to have a payoff, and this isn't just DPS, but it's like anything you play in anything, right? Like if it's just more complicated than it needs to be, and by complicated I mean like hoops to jump through to achieve what a normal character can do normally, then that's not going to be played. It's different to like playing a board game where you're like raising the difficulty because you just want to get a higher achievement, right? Like, oh, I'm going to make this have more conditions because then it's harder and it's more convoluted, but I'm trying to do it on a harder difficulty. If you're just picking a character in a game to play and one of them achieves, I don't know, whatever level, and then another one is a lot harder to play, but is only ever going to get to that level, then yeah, I mean, you've got to kind of have, I don't know. Some people might want to play the harder one because then they can claim that they're better at the game, whatever. But yeah, it is going to come down to results.
You like the idea though, personally, of if you work harder, you get better rewards, right? In that instance, like the payoff should be worth the effort.
Yeah, I think 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think if there's a puzzle or there's a efficiency that you need to find in order to make it work, I think that should be a thing. Where it gets a bit weird though is whether it's either complete like the difference between say jumping through your hoops or lining up your ducks or whatever you want to call it, like making the engine work.
Mm.
If the difference between making the engine work is like 0 to 100, then I don't think that's good because it means that you can't play it unless you are like getting it going. But then once you're getting it going, if it's way above everything else, then that's different. That's like if you can figure this out, you win, right?
Yeah.
If you can't, then you lose. And I like it more of like the amount you can figure out gives you that growth.
Yeah.
And I use the example of how you played the snowflake, right? Like I know a lot of people in our chat were talking about the tornado card or whatever, and I was like, yeah, totally. I can see that's a great card. Like a burn that does an attack 3 on 5 targets and pushes everyone. Like seems great. The way that you played it with a lot of your other cards, though, was you managed to pump heaps of damage out of there, also control things through a variation of other cards. And as you got higher, you picked some of the like attack to just do heaps of damage cards, which was great. But early on, that early to mid, you were doing a lot of damage with what the tools that you had. And I think that's a lot more than someone just picking it up and playing the cards would have figured out.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you were rewarded for figuring out how to really squeeze that, like the DPS out of that character. And it worked. It was really good for our party. And I mean, you seem to enjoy it. So it kind of gave you a sense of satisfaction from the outside anyway. So
Yeah. I think that's what I like about Frosthaven in that regard is that I didn't feel pressured to pick all of the damage cards, which would have been the most obvious thing if I was going to play a damaging thing. I got to mix and match, and that's the Haven series, right? Every time you level up, you get to pick one of the two, and the correct way is to pick one of the two, and the other one you have to pick later as you level up. But that choice of being able to then mix and match different abilities and different play styles, it creates a lot of just really, I don't know, uniqueness to your type of build that you're putting together, which I love.
yeah, exactly. You get to personalize it. And I think this is why decisions are important. And we're going to a completely different area now. And
Hell
maybe this is
yeah.
our next topic, right? Like, should decisions matter? But uh, how you pick actually starts, like, I'll bring it around. I'll bring it right back to the start, right? How you pick is probably going to decide what part of that trifecta, if we're really breaking it down to tank, support, and DPS. How you pick your cards and how you play your cards determines which way your character leans, right? And I think we gave some good examples there of like the Galaxy playing in a way where you can play it as like hard DPS with a little bit of support, or you can play it hard support with a little bit of DPS, right? But
Like
it
a
probably
Venn
isn't.
diagram, right? Like the three-way Venn diagram.
Exactly. But it's probably not leaning into tank very much. It didn't have much self-sustain. It had the ability to bring its health back up for the DPS reasons and the ability to not get attacked at all. But it wasn't really absorbing. Whereas some of the other characters, like, you play your Galaxy, sorry, not Galaxy, the Vortex in a different way. You could have gone heavy into the pits and stuff like that, the void pits. That probably is playing not in support, but it's probably more control-y, but it's a different way of supporting the group.
Yes.
But your DPS output's probably either less or harder until you got to those higher level cards. So I think that's what's great about Haven is the decisions allow you to kind of customize your character in a direction, which is very similar to an RPG, right? You play a D&D, you play an RPG, you kind of have these choices you make of your items and your abilities and your spells and all that kind of crap that allow you to craft, I don't know, what kind of character do you want? And I think Haven captures a really good kind of, slice of that.
Yeah. Can you think of any Frosthaven or Crimson Scales character that we've seen so far that just can't DPS? That they're like not even 50-50. They're just, because I can think of one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's spicy.
I feel like every character can do really like a lot, and there's one that I think is just nowhere in. It's like the Venn diagram between like maybe tanking and healing is so much stronger than its damage potential.
Tanking and healing. Yeah, sure, go. What?
You're playing it.
Oh, the Beetle. I was gonna say I wasn't sure if you meant Crimson Scales as well. Yeah, 100%. Like, I've seen a couple of cards that have decent damage output, but
because even though classes may have a burn that is a big attack or whatever, I think it's fair to say they're still not necessarily DPS. It's just an option, right? Compared in comparison to the larger landscape of all the other characters.
Yeah, I think it's got to be consistency, right? Like, having a big burn card doesn't mean that you're DPS. I mean, but then again, picking that card and using it optimally can make a massive difference, right? True. I got 100, or when we were tracking DPS, I like topped 140 DPS or something like that on the shards through playing one card, right? And it wasn't a burn, but it did require a certain amount of setup to get going, but it just absolutely tore everything to pieces. So that's not really a strategy, right? That's just picking a card. So, but I'd say that that's probably true. And I know I'm going to probably get a bunch of people to talk about it in the comments and say I'm wrong, because I think that the damage output from the Beetle is a lot of the retaliate stuff.
Yeah.
Right? It's a lot of the retaliate stuff, and it's the colonies to pump out that extra retaliate and the damage mitigation. But yeah, you're probably right. Like, as a traditional, where are your attack cards? It really lacks attack cards.
Which I'm not upset with. I like that. I like that they exist. I'm just looking at all the rest of them. I'm like, I'm pretty sure every other character has a fair amount of damage cards. Like, just a lot of damage options. And I'm talking direct damage, like where you're directly dealing with the enemy and you can't really get like countered by it. You're in control of the damage that you are applying.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I mean, I'd say maybe the only other example of the same thing you're talking about, and I don't think it doesn't have no capacity for DPS, but it's probably more of what you're talking about, how the cards are laid out, is the trap.
Thank you. I actually had that in brackets. I was waiting for you to say whether or not, because it's more like maybe this.
Like, this is where this becomes convoluted and where I agree people who have said, oh, but you can't put them in those three categories, and completely agree. We're not saying that all of them, we're just talking about this in comparison to some other archetypes that are very popular and widespread and well-known, right? But the trap also doesn't have a lot of cards. It's just say like, hey, flip an amD and do 4 damage, right? Yeah. It's like, it wants you to use the traps to do a whole bunch of things, and it can absolutely pump. Like, we saw that when Mark played it, right? So by no means is the trap a low damage character.
No.
But it's not a traditional play your card, flip an amD, and the thing dies. Right? Like, it wants you to do a whole bunch of other things. Whereas if you compare it to, I'm just looking at the list here of like Fist or Drill or Kelp or Coral, they're a lot more of just do a thing, right? Play your card, and then you have class abilities that function around like how you get your cards, what you do with your cards, etc. But the cards still say attack 3. right? Or they say attack 1 like 8 times in a turn, right? And you can buff that, right?
Like I had another example on the because the other thing is we don't know all the characters in and out because we didn't play them. So I've only seen your version of the Coral, right? And you played a very tanky, retaliatey kind of that kind of thing. I would never have looked at it as a damaged character, but I know that other people say, "Holy crap, it can really pump because of shock and all these other things." That made me go, "Oh, so it can be played in that," and that's why I've kind of applied that to nearly every Frosthaven character I've seen and gone, oh, "Okay, well, they can all do it to a degree, like considerably. It's just the people that I played with played them a certain way, and yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a good point. And I reckon that I reckon they all land on damage, and then they lean to either support or they lean to tank.
Yeah.
Tankiness being self-survivability in some capacity. But some of them don't lean that way either. They just like lean more into DPS. They just double down on DPS.
yeah,
Um
way more
yeah.
seconds,
Pardon?
way more seconds."
Yeah, 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 exactly.
Uh,
Um
I asked before, or for the healers and also the tanking one, and I'm going to ask for DPS. Do you always need a DPS in the party?
in Haven or in general?
We'll go with Haven.
Yes, you do. You need to progress that. You need to kill the monsters, right? Like
In a
it's
kill
all
all,
about
yeah.
killing.
I suppose it's
This is like 98% of the game, right?
pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you do, and I think that's why it's designed that way. I actually like this has been really interesting as a thought experiment, as a conversation, as a discussion over a few weeks because it's made me realize. I mean, those kind of class archetypes are way more vague in Haven,
Yes.
than I thought. Even though people still refer to them, which is fine. But also that the way the game is designed is that you can't really have a dedicated support, right? Like, not only is it probably not fun to play, but it's just not effective. And if you have too many of them, the game probably doesn't move forward.
Mm.
And I think about that with things like the music note in Gloomhaven, and I know you don't have a lot of memories of that, even if you saw it at all. But like, that's one of the hardest support characters across all of Haven that I've seen. You couldn't have 3 or 4 of those in the game because if you end up with 2 of them in the same party, like, yeah, and they're OP and they just make the monsters do nothing for multiple turns. But like, you got to kill something eventually, right? And that's the thing. So maybe that's why they haven't gone towards that.
They
that
haven't done
kind of
that
playstyle a lot.
again. Yeah. They Isaac didn't include a music note variety type, like one to fill that role in Frosthaven.
Yeah, exactly. They're all do it in different ways. You got the banner spear that it probably wants to play with the supporty thing, but also still pushes forward. You got the trap that does that in a way. You know, there's a whole bunch of other. I'm not going to go through them all, but they're all trying to control the battlefield or help people, but they're doing it and I think that's really clever. Like, it's a really clever design to avoid that potential problem. In saying that, the one music note character in there was busted and was always going to make every party better because you had 3 other DPS. So when you have 3 other DPS and a hard support that's making the monsters do nothing and all your allies be heaps better, like, it's pretty good.
That's right.
So,
And then those parties finish the game with those characters and then come into Frosthaven and then go, what the hell is this?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so interesting. And that's why I'm fascinated to see what they do in 2.0 because 2.0 had those kind of issues where there were clearly just characters that were better, right?
2.0,
and I'm probably...
said.
Pardon?
You just said because 2.0 had those issues, but we don't know.
Sorry. Gloomhaven had those issues, and 2.0 is kind of iterating and fixing those issues, right? But original Gloomhaven, like 1.0, had that thing where like some of the characters dropped off. Like your starter characters, from memory, a few of them at least, dropped off after a certain level. It just didn't scale as well as some of the unlocked characters. And Frosthaven, I don't think had that problem. I feel like most of the characters all felt reasonably powerful. And even the ones that, like, I mean, poor Drifter cops heaps of shit for this, but who are probably a lot more straight lined in that regards. Like, the Drifter could pump, right? Really pump. But like the Brute, for example, in 1.0, I played it and I enjoyed it, but at a point you just weren't competing damage wise as compared to some of the other characters that you unlock later. And so like going back to make the brute again later on felt real bad. You're like, oh, well, this isn't. Yeah, and so I assume they fixed that kind of curve.
Yeah,
With
okay.
2.0.
I would love, obviously, I think we would all love that if they made all the characters feel permanently relevant, I guess, at any given time, so that you could experiment with late game party compositions that consist of, you know, the Tinkerer and the Brute, and then to unlock characters and feel just as effective as any of the a combination of the unlocks. And I think that Frosthaven did that, and I think Crimson Scales is doing that so far. I think it's kept it like that.
Well, I mean, there's 6. You kind of have to. You don't have to. It's interesting because like you have 6 starters, right? You know, in Gloomhaven 2.0. Yeah, that's right.
I think so.
Yeah. So you have 6. I'm just going to quickly check. So we got the Brute, the Cragheart, the Mind Thief, the Scoundrel, the what's that? The Spellweaver. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And the Tinkerer. Yeah, cool. So you got 6, right? Everybody, if you're playing with 4 people and they all start with a character, when you finish a PQ, you get a new character. So assuming that everybody moves on to the character they just unlocked, you only get back to those last 2 starters if you make the choice to go like, I don't like this symbol, or you know, having a look, I don't like it, or you run out of unlocks, which is pretty late in the game.
Yeah.
So like, if you don't do that, people might come back and go like, oh, I haven't played the Scoundrel, or I haven't played the Tinkerer. And from memory, the Tinkerer cops a bit of shit for being pretty undertuned in the original compared to some of the other classes. So imagine you towards the end of the game, you're in the back 25% of the game. You're like, oh, I might start a Tinkerer. And you're like, wow, this feels really so much weaker than the last 4 or 5 characters I played. I mean, that sucks, right?
Yeah.
Whereas that I didn't feel that playing the Geminate into Coral into Bannerspear. I didn't feel the Bannerspear was a step back.
No.
Like it felt as powerful as the Coral in regards to like how it could contribute.
Well, Phil went from Deathwalker into Meteor into Blinkblade, right? Or something like that. And yeah, he got stronger. So,
He got very strong. He coined most of the problems we saw with boss scenarios.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this character is broken. Yeah, so.
no, good chat. That was a good discussion. We'll revisit them starting with Healer next week, and we'll just keep working on the same 3 topics for the rest of our podcast.
That's it. Well, we're up to what? This is episode 107?
107.
107. Do you reckon we can make it to 1,000?
Like, I was expecting you to say 500, maybe, or maybe 200, or something slightly more realistic. 1,000. We're gonna run out. We might run out of things to talk about, guys. Like, we managed to squeeze a lot out of this game.
I mean, hopefully 2.0 comes out before then, right?
Oh yeah, then we can start again. Amazing. All right, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks again for joining us for another episode of amDirt. Join us next week when we are reunited with Phil to tackle another scenario with which I don't actually have a clue what it is because we end up these days picking one 5 minutes before we actually get started. Yeah. So it's exciting.
It's exciting. It's a mystery.
That's right. In the meantime, I've been your host, Eddie, and I've been joined again by Gaz.
And remember, when it comes to DPS, it's all there is.